In this video, I will be breaking down Swamp Thing Volume 4. In the last volume, John Constantine met Swamp Thing for the very first time, and Constantine was promising Swamp Thing information about Swamp Thing's nature in exchange for Swamp Thing helping Constantine deal with various threats across America. So Swamp Thing, he went on various one-off adventures here and there, but eventually he grew frustrated by Constantine constantly giving him the runaround. Well, in this volume, we will learn what all of that was for, and the huge threat that Constantine will need Swamp Thing's help for. And it all leads to a ginormous battle against something called the Great Darkness. And all of the DC heroes that deal with magic will come together to battle this thing, and it is super exciting. Beyond that, we have a few one-off issues, and we also have Swamp Thing meeting the Parliament of Trees for the first time, which is something very important to Swamp Thing's lore. Alright, let's dive into it now. Swamp Thing Volume 4. Swamp Thing Volume 4, written by Alan Moore, art by Stephen Bissette, John Totleben, and Stan Woch. Swamp Thing Volume 2, Issue 43, Windfall. A man dressed in hippie clothes named Chester Williams is searching through the forest. Chester is a naturalist and occasional drug dealer. While in the forest, he comes across one of Swamp Thing's tubers, which had dropped to the ground. We saw Abby eat one of these tubers back in issue 34. She had a hallucinogenic experience from it. Chester, he decides to take the tuber with him. Chester goes back to his apartment, and he studies the tuber. He tries to look it up in a book of his he has on plants, but he can't find a match and is not quite sure exactly what it is. He decides to cut the tuber up into 3 different pieces so he can see inside. Chester, he is soon visited by a friend of his named Dave. Dave has a sick wife. She's dying of cancer. He asks if Chester has any dope that can help ease his wife's pain. Chester says he's all out. Dave seems desperate though. Chester, thinking of Swamp Thing's tuber that he just cut up, he decides to offer a slice of it up to Dave. He says, "Hey look, this probably won't do any good, but, well, this is something I found out in the swamps today. I've been trying to identify it, but really I don't know what the hell it is. It's a little like a yam, but it's really complex and highly organized. It's got some similarities with datura root, so maybe it's some sort of unknown psychedelic. I don't know, man, but if you want it, it's yours, no charge." Dave is a little disappointed, but he decides to take it. Later that night, another man comes by. This man's name is Milo. Milo is a rude and boorish man. Milo, he's just here to get some drugs and get screwed up for the night. He wants to have a good time. Chester says, well, he has nothing. But Milo, he also spots the tuber and he's interested in it. He offers $5. Chester says it's not for sale. Milo argues, look, okay, I'll give you $15, okay? $15 for one lousy slice of that gunk. Chester, he says, all right, fine, just take it and go. Milo takes the slice. He makes sure to take the biggest one, too. And he doesn't even have the $15 on him. He says he's gonna have to owe it to Chester later. So these 2 people have a slice of Swamp Thing's tuber. What will their experiences be? The first man, Dave, he takes the tuber back to his dying girlfriend, Sandy. And Sandy, she eats it. And she has a psychedelically pleasant experience. She feels like she has become one with the world. She is happy. She marvels at the intricate beauty of life in the universe. She's able to let go of her fear of dying. And her boyfriend have a fantastic evening. It really lifted her spirits. Milo, on the other hand, he ate the tuber slice that he got, and then he went to a bar. And then he started feeling like he was burning up. So he ran outside of the bar and he fell into a puddle. And then he got up. And then he felt like he was reliving the horrors of Swamp Thing's life. Milo wandered the streets and had this crazy horror trip and saw various things from Swamp Thing's past. And then he got hit by a truck on the street. Days later, Dave comes by and thanks Chester. Dave says his wife did end up passing, but that stuff that Chester gave him for her, it made everything so beautiful. He only got a taste of it when he kissed her, but even he could feel what was happening inside her. Chester says he's glad it helped. Dave continues, "You gave my wife's last moments some meaning, Chester. You ought to feel good about that." Later on, a friend of Milo's arrives and says, "You dumb hippie bastard. I hope you feel bad about what you did, man. You gave Milo that stuff, you as good as killed him." Chester argues, "Hey, he came in here and demanded that stuff, man. And the other person that tried it had a real good time." The friend of Milo's replies, "He was screaming about burning up, man. That don't sound like a good time to me." Chester, he theorizes on what the tuber is and believes that maybe the plant is some kind of cosmic litmus paper. You eat it and it tells you whether you are a bad person or a good person. The friend of Milo replies, Yeah, later for all that intergalactic crap. As far as I'm concerned, it's just some weird junk that makes people unbelievably screwed up. Which, brings me to what I wanted to ask you. You got any more? Pretty funny. Despite this stuff almost killing his friend, the man really wants to try it himself. Chester does not give it to the man. That night, Chester is looking at the tuber, and he is deciding if he wants to eat the last slice of it. But is he ready for the cosmic litmus paper that will tell him whether he is a good or bad person? He thinks on if he is a good person. I mean, he doesn't abuse the planet or other people. He's not violent. But he does eat meat, and sometimes he thinks some pretty bad things. He said some bad stuff to his ex when she left that he wishes he hadn't. Chester thinks, but hell, man, there's worse people than me. At least I never hit a woman. Some guys do that all the time. I guess in the end, you're as good a person as you think you are. It's just a question of faith, that's all. So, Chester, he's eyeing the tuber. He's thinking, is he gonna eat it? And then he decides, nah. Chester, in the end, reluctantly decides against trying the third portion for himself. Swamp Thing Volume 2, Issue 44, Bogeymen. In Louisiana, Swamp Thing visits Abby in her home by generating a body for himself from the flora in her bathroom plumbing. His body comes right out of her bathroom sink. Abby, she runs into the bathroom with a plunger, and she finds Swamp Thing there. Swamp Thing tells her, "I thought that you must be tired of visiting me out in the swamps all the time, so I came here." Abby, she is happy to see Swamp Thing, although she's a little concerned that he might make her apartment all dirty. She lays down some newspaper for Swamp Thing to walk on. Swamp Thing, he expresses his worry about John Constantine's silence. He says, "He leads me around the country, tantalizing me with mysteries, and then vanishes with so much left unexplained." While Swamp Thing is talking to Abby, Abby seems preoccupied, thinking about the cleanliness of her furniture with a walking swamp in her house. She also doesn't want Swamp Thing to be seen by her neighbors through the window. Swamp Thing, he starts picking up on this from Abby, and he realizes that maybe him being here is a little bit of an inconvenience. So he sadly returns to his swamp through the kitchen plumbing. Now, the events of this issue take place between issue 2 and 4 of DC's big event comic, Crisis on Infinite Earths. So right now, the sky is orange in the world, and everything is feeling a little bit apocalyptic. In Gotham City, Constantine finds a man named Steve Dayton in a bar. Steve Dayton goes by the hero name Mento, and he is a member of the hero team known as Doom Patrol. Steve is drinking in that bar, depressed over the supposed end of days that seems to be going on outside because of the Crisis on Infinite Earths. Constantine tells him, "Dayton, come on mate, snap out of it. There's no point sulking. Alright, so there's an apocalypse going on outside, so what? Don't worry about the crisis business. It's what comes after that you should be worrying about." Constantine and Steve head outside, and outside they encounter Batman, He warns them to go back inside, but upon realizing that Steve is actually Mento of the Doom Patrol, he leaves them alone. Meanwhile, in Louisiana, we meet a serial killer called the Bogeyman. The Bogeyman is a character that will be referenced many years later in Sandman issue 14 by Neil Gaiman in the Serial Killer Convention story arc. Well, this issue marks the first appearance of this so-called Bogeyman, although the story is told from a first-person perspective from the Bogeyman's view, so we never actually see what he looks like. The Bogeyman is a serial killer that has about 165 victims to his name. He remembers all of his victims by their eyes and the order in which he killed them. Throughout this issue, he asks his latest victim, who's still alive, for a number, and then when given a number, the Bogeyman recites passionately about their eyes. Because the Bogeyman is an avid collector. When he is told the number 58, the Bogeyman says, 58, let's see. Her eyes were gray-green like an Aggie I once had, only with little flecks of ochre around the center. Ask me another. He is then told the number 132. The Bogeyman to this replies, 132. He had beautiful, beautiful blue eyes. I mean, just perfect like the sky, like the sort of blue you'd only get in paintings. I mean, how can they call me callous? After all, I remember every single pair of eyes. The Bogeyman gets his latest male victim really drunk at this bar, and then he offers to help the man get home. And on the way, he strangles the man in a secluded place in the swamps. The Bogeyman doesn't bother burying his latest victim, as the body will probably not be found for a few weeks. The Bogeyman, after killing his victim, tries to walk back to the road and get home. He is taking a shortcut, and on his shortcut, he runs into Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing found the body of his earlier victim, and knows that this Bogeyman is a bad man. The Bogeyman is so deluded, he believes that it is his job to be the Bogeyman and kill people. But when he sees Swamp Thing, he thinks that Swamp Thing was maybe chosen to be his replacement? And that Swamp Thing is the new Bogeyman? The Bogeyman thinks to himself, no, this is all wrong. This doesn't happen to me. That's understood. It goes with my job, unless... No, they wouldn't appoint anyone else. Not without telling me. I'm perfect for this job. I've always done everything by the book. The Bogeyman tries to get away from Swamp Thing, but he missteps and gets his foot stuck in the mud. And then the mud starts sucking him under. And as he is sinking, he tells Swamp Thing, Hey, listen, do you know who I am? I killed 165 people. Listen, you tell him, right? You tell him who I was and what I did. I'm not ashamed. My name is... The Bogeyman could not finish his sentence as he got sucked down into the mud below the surface, where he is tormented by the spirits of his victims as he drowns. Swamp Thing, reflecting on this evil man he just encountered, wonders if this is all connected to all the other evil run-ins he had faced recently. Swamp Thing, he wonders where John Constantine is, and why has Constantine left him in the dark? Why has he not reached back out to him? In Abby's home that night, Abby receives a phone call from John Constantine, telling her to give Swamp Thing a message. The message is for Swamp Thing to meet him in San Miguel, California, a week from today. This will be his last stop before the finale. Swamp Thing Volume 2, Issue 45, Ghost Dance. The story in this issue is based on the real-life Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California. I've never heard of this house before reading this issue, but I read a little bit about it and it is pretty fascinating. It was a giant mansion that began construction in 1884 by Sarah Winchester and remained under construction continuously until her death 38 years later. This Sarah Winchester was an heiress who amassed great wealth after the death of her husband, who was the firearms magnate William Wirt Winchester. creator of the Winchester rifle. When she inherited her husband's money, she became one of the wealthiest women in the world at the time. The Winchester Mystery House remained under construction for 38 years, constantly being added to. It featured hundreds of false doors, dead ends, stairways to nowhere, and closets that opened into 5-bedroom suites in an attempt to confuse the alleged ghosts of people who were shot to death by the Winchester rifles Sarah's family made and sold. 9 months after Sarah's death in 1922, the house became a real big tourist attraction. It is sometimes claimed to be one of the most haunted places in the world. So all of this is some important background information to know as we head into this issue. Alan Moore, he changes up the facts a bit. He calls it the Cambridge Mansion in the issue instead of the Winchester Mystery Mansion, and instead of it being Sarah Winchester, it is now a woman named Amy Cambridge. So when the issue begins, there are 2 couples in San Miguel, California. They are driving towards the deserted 6-acre mansion of Amy Cambridge, long dead family member of the designer of the Cambridge repeater rifle. The 2 couples are on their way here for kicks to explore this mansion because of its legend of being haunted. The one couple is David and Linda. David is kind of a nerd, and his wife Linda is beautiful with blonde hair, perhaps a little bit out of David's league. The other couple is Rod and Judy. Rod seems a little bit like a jock and a little bit of a bully. He and Linda are having a secret affair. As they are driving towards the mansion, David explains what the legend of the house is. The house is haunted by the ghosts of all those who were slain by the rifle, and the ghosts told Amy Cambridge that if she wanted to undo the wrong her family's guns had caused, then the sound of hammers must never stop. So that is why she never stopped construction on the house, with shifts working both day and night. This is why the house was built so big, with so many false doors and dead ends and stairways to nowhere. As they arrive at the mansion, they get out of their car. Rod is flirting openly with David's girlfriend, Linda, right in front of his own girlfriend, Judy. They all walk on, and they are standing and marveling at the size of this mansion. David explains there's 160 rooms and 13 bathrooms. They all enter the house, and they wander around. It is like a maze inside. They worry they might get lost. Linda, she wanders off, and Rod follows her. Upstairs, Rod encounters a nude woman who he believes is Linda. The woman begins making love to him. Rod runs his hands through the woman's hair, and then he pulls off her wig and reveals a horrific face which looks mangled thanks to a gunshot wound to that face. This woman isn't Linda. This woman is actually the ghost of Franny Mitchell, a woman who was killed by a gunshot wound to her head. When Rod discovers that this woman isn't Linda, he's horrified. He runs away. He runs and opens a door that he thought led to another room, but instead it just opens and leads outside. And they're on the 3rd floor. Rod, he charges through the door, and since it just leads to nowhere outside, he falls 3 stories to his death. Elsewhere, Linda wanders into a room where the ghosts of Cowboy Ed Clutty and the Dutchman have been shooting each other to pieces for almost an hour. They are arguing over marked cards. She backs into the hallway in horror, only to be surrounded by a gang of firing squad victims. Not long after, she loses consciousness from her fear. We go over to Judy. She is wandering aimlessly. She finds no ghosts, but she does see an odd green freestanding wardrobe. She opens the wardrobe and peers inside of it, and inside she sees an oncoming stampede of buffalo, all killed by the repeater rifles. She closes the wardrobe, and then she laughs, believing it to be just a hallucination. Moments later, though, the stampede of buffalo crashes through the wardrobe door, and it tramples her to death. Elsewhere, we jump over to David. He is wandering around, and he finds many other ghosts, all killed in one way or another. Some of them cowboys, some natives, some people that committed suicide. So many people. All of them ghosts, all killed by the Cambridge rifle. David, he prays for some kind of help, and then he encounters Swamp Thing, and he thinks that his prayers are answered, and Swamp Thing is here to save them. Swamp Thing is here because this is the city where Constantine told Abby to tell Swamp Thing to meet him at last issue. David explains the history of the house to Swamp Thing, saying, "There are ghosts, hundreds of them, thousands, everything ever killed by a Cambridge weapon. That's why they made her build such a big house for them. So many guns, so many dead people. The sound of hammers must never stop," they said. They made her build a house to appease them so that they'd let her be. Built with nails the way Cambridge built a country. God, my wife's in there somewhere. My friends, please, help them, please. Swamp Thing leaves David and searches for a solution inside the house. Inside the house, Swamp Thing finds Linda passed out. The ghosts are closing in on him. Swamp Thing remembers what David said, that the ghosts commanded that the sound of hammers must never stop when the mansion was being built. So, Swamp Thing, he begins pounding his fists on the table so that the sound resonates throughout the mansion. Bang! 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 The sound of hammers must never stop. Bang! 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 Hearing the sound, the ghosts begin running and disperse, and eventually, they disappear. Swamp Thing, he keeps pounding the table until it is destroyed. Afterwards, Swamp Thing grabs Linda and brings her outside, and then he leaves her for David to find, and then Swamp Thing disappears. Later on, David managed to find his wife Linda there outside. When Linda wakes up, though, she doesn't seem to care much about David. She seems ultra concerned about Rod, her lover. She says, "What happened? Where's Rod? Did he get out?" David is confused. He knew his wife was friendly with Rod, but this is a little bit extra. Linda reveals to David that she has been having an affair with Rod for 6 months. She says that the two of them need to go find help. David, he sadly follows her, just doing what she wants. Swamp Thing, he manages to find John Constantine in the forest nearby the mansion. Swamp Thing tells Constantine, "I came as requested. I am no longer certain why. I know that you will only give me another riddle, another enigma, another senseless destination. Never the truth." Constantine jovially replies, "The truth? Is that all? Well, what can you say? Lads, he wants the truth. Come on out and say hello." Constantine introduces Swamp Thing to his companions. He has with him Frank North, who is like a rugged biker, and Benjamin Cox, who's kind of a nerd obsessed with magic who we saw a few issues ago. Constantine says that they are all going to be helping him with the final stages. They all start walking. Swamp Thing asks, "Where are they going?" Constantine answers, "Where are we going? Where are we going? You know, you're worse than a bloody kid on a day trip. We're going to show you the truth that you're so keen on. So, as it happens, I've got a couple of front row tickets for the end of the universe. I thought it'd be best to use them now. I mean, you never know. There may not be a second performance." They all then wander into the fog. In an epilogue, we see David. He visits a gun shop, and he buys himself a Cambridge gun. He plans on using this gun to kill his cheating wife, Linda. David, he thinks of the cocking of the gun, and then he thinks to himself, the sound of hammers must never stop. Swamp Thing Volume 2, Issue 46, Revelations. This issue is a Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover. The events in this issue are concurrent with those from Crisis on Infinite Earths Issue 5, in which 5 parallel Earths begin to merge together. So that'll help give some context on all the crazy stuff you're gonna see go down in this issue. Swamp Thing, John Constantine, Benjamin Cox, and Frank North are all in the city, and they stand in amazement as the world falls into anarchy around them due to the crisis. The sky is orange, and on the streets are pure chaos. The streets are filled with creatures and people from various time periods. We see pirates and spacemen, and dinosaurs and sea beasts. Constantine, he knows the situation is serious, but he is more concerned about what will happen following the crisis. John Constantine and Swamp Thing are then mysteriously teleported through space to the satellite of the Monitor. Constantine tells Swamp Thing, though, that the Monitor is dead. Swamp Thing asks, "But why are we here? That chaos that we saw in the sky. Is the world ending?" Constantine interrupts and says, The world isn't ending, it's the multiverse that's ending." He then explains how the multiverse is a whole series of parallel universes, parallel Earths, and something is eating its way through them like a maggot munching through a stack of maps. Constantine then leads Swamp Thing into another room in the satellite that is filled with various members of the superhero community from many parallel dimensions. John introduces him to the Monitor's successor, a man named Alexander Luthor Jr. He is the one that was responsible for bringing them here. Alexander Luthor comes from Earth 3. He is the son of Lex Luthor and Lois Lane of that world. Alexander Luthor has a much more convoluted backstory having to tie in with the Crisis on Infinite Earths, but all you really need to know is that he is the Monitor's successor in the battle in the Crisis on Infinite Earths. Alexander Luthor, talking to Swamp Thing and Constantine, understands that the Crisis will have an effect on the spiritual world as well as the material one, and he is relying on Swamp Thing and his allies to deal with these matters on the psychic plane. Swamp Thing is confused. He does not really understand how he could possibly help with that. Constantine and Swamp Thing, they then return to Earth. Constantine tells Swamp Thing about an existing threat beyond that of the Crisis, a group called the Bruguera. Constantine explains that the Bruguera are a cult of South American warlocks. They saw the Crisis coming, and they capitalized on it for their own evil plans. Constantine then explains some of their barbaric recruitment practices. If you're someone that's selected to join the Bruguera, you first have to stand under a waterfall of the Thraguin River for 40 days and nights. Next, you have to catch a skull thrown by your instructor from the crown of a tricorn hat. After that, you must kill your best friend to show that you're completely without compassion. Then, you must sign a document with blood from your own veins, and so on, you know. Beyond that, they also wear waistcoats made out of dead corpses. The Bruguera have been slowly achieving their goals by using a killer called the Invunch, also known as the Guardian of their cave. The Invunch is that thing that killed Constantine's girlfriend, Emma, back in issue 37. The Bruguera have been using their influence to force the dark stuff to surface all over the world. Constantine has been directing Swamp Thing to certain trouble spots around the world over the last several issues in order to counter this, and also so Constantine could learn from it. Constantine believes that the Bruguera are planning on bringing something back. After the Crisis, everything will be unstable and vulnerable for a while, including the spiritual plane. That's when the Bruguera will bring their entity back. And with that entity, they plan to destroy heaven. Constantine explains that they need to go to South America now, and with a bit of luck, they can stop the Bruguera before they complete their conjuring ritual and summon this great darkness back. Before they go, though, there is one more stop they need to make. Constantine tells Swamp Thing, "I always keep my promises. I promised you knowledge, real knowledge, that wasn't a trick, you know. I mean, sure, it helped stringing you along, but in the end I always deliver. There's a grove in the Amazon rainforest, a special grove. The local Indians call it the Parliament of Trees. Everything you ever wanted to know, everything you need to know, is there. It's in Brazil, near the source in the River Teve. It's something worth seeing, I promise you. Constantine has some business he has to attend to first, but he tells Swamp Thing to say bye to his girlfriend first because they might be gone for a while. Who knows? Maybe even forever. Elsewhere, in London, England, Constantine's ally, Sister Anne-Marie, isn't able to locate another ally, Judith. Anne-Marie, she is heading back to her hotel. As she exits a train on the wrong platform, the Invunch appears, and it kills her, tearing the cross from her neck. So first Emma, and now Sister Anne-Marie, the Invunch has killed another of Constantine's allies. Swamp Thing Volume 2, Issue 47, The Parliament of Trees. At the office of the Huma Daily Courier newspaper, a photographer named Howard Fleck tries to pitch a story about certain photos he took while he was in the swamps outside of Huma, Louisiana. Howard explains that he was in the swamp. He usually just photographs nature and sells it to nature magazines. But on this day, he came across this beautiful woman with white hair. He's referring to Abby. He saw Abby there in the swamps. He thought she was striking, so he discreetly took some photos of her. But then Abby took off her top. So he continued taking more photos, as there are certain magazines out there that would be interested in pictures of a woman as beautiful as this, topless. Howard claims that he would have asked her permission, of course, to take the photos, but he didn't want to ruin her spontaneity. But then, as he is snapping photos of her, Swamp Thing came, and him and Abby started making love. Howard says, "As the Lord my witness, I ain't never seen anything so disgusting. There was bugs and mold on that thing, and she was kissing it. I was so shocked, I almost forgot to reload my camera. I almost threw up, I tell ya. I saw things that turn a man's stomach before they finally up and left. Gentlemen, I went through purgatory for these pictures. As I see it, you ought to be grateful that I'm offering them to you first. Pictures like these, I could take them and sell them anywhere." Now, when this Howard was taking pictures of Swamp Thing and Abby and they were unaware, Swamp Thing and Abby, out of earshot of Howard, discussed John Constantine and how Swamp Thing is supposed to go and meet him at the source of the River Teve in Brazil. Swamp Thing states that he must go, as this is the final stage where he will learn all the things he needs to know about what he is and what he is meant to do. Swamp Thing says bye to Abby, and then he enters the green. He focuses on a seed near the River Teve. He regrows his body there and just steps away from John Constantine. Constantine then leads Swamp Thing through the jungles. They come across some natives there. Swamp Thing comments that it's odd that they are not frightened of him. In fact, they seem to revere him. Constantine tells him, "You are not the first plant elemental they've seen. Over the centuries, circumstances have conspired to make others like him when the need arose." After they walk some more, Constantine says he can go no further. Humans aren't allowed beyond this point unless they are called, but he tells Swamp Thing to go on ahead. He has brought him to a place called the Parliament of Trees. The Parliament of Trees has existed on Earth long before humans. Born when an animal died in flames and merged with the earth, the elementals became protectors of plant life throughout history. When they had done their time, they would join the Parliament of Trees, a group mind of former elementals of the past, including Alex Olsen, the original Swamp Thing. The elementals would then take root and grow in peace as trees. Swamp Thing arrives and thinks this place is beautiful. Eventually, he meets Alex Olsen, the previous Swamp Thing we saw back in House of Secrets, issue 92. Alex is now a tree. Alex tells him, "You have approached the Parliament. Your ancestors welcome you." Alex then explains how all the other elementals here are like him. They are humans who died in flames and rose as a swamp monster. Alex points out the predecessor of Swamp Thing, he says. His name was Albert Hollerer, a German pilot shot down into a bog in 1942. He died in flames, but his mind survived, albeit damaged and confused. and he rose again, dressed in dirt and moss, and eventually he found his way here. Alex advises that if Swamp Thing wants information from the Parliament, he will have to enter the green and let his mind intertwine with those of the others. Swamp Thing, he begins to do so, and by merging with the green here, Swamp Thing starts learning the histories of all the other elementals, along with additional uses for his abilities that he had not even conceived of due to his human mindset. For example, Swamp Thing, he thinks, I have restricted myself to one size, to one shape, but I have never attempted to animate dead or carve in wood with my consciousness. Never thought to manipulate insects with my sense and juices. So many possibilities. He starts picking up something about multiple body control and something about even time travel. Before he can learn more, he gets interrupted from all of these revelations about his nature. The other elementals in the green have become aware of his presence. Swamp Thing asks them, I came seeking knowledge. A great danger threatens. I must know how to use my power to its best advantage. The other elementals feel that Swamp Thing is too set in his human ways of thinking, and he has much to learn. They say that he should seek inner calm and not power, since power leads to anger, and anger is like a wildfire. They indicate that his perception of what is evil is naive. All organisms play the role nature has granted them. An aphid eats a leaf, a ladybug eats an aphid, soil absorbs the dead ladybug, plant feeds upon the soil. Is an aphid evil? Is a ladybug evil? Is soil evil? Where is evil in all the wood? Any moral judgments that Swamp Thing or anyone else might make are just purely subjective and useless. Swamp Thing, he still doesn't understand how this will help him. The Parliament of Trees tell him, the Parliament has spoken, the audience is concluded. Swamp Thing, he tries to ask more questions, but the Parliament of Trees shuts him out of their mind and expel him from connecting with them in the green. Alex Olson tells Swamp Thing, the Parliament has spoken. You had best leave now. Swamp Thing argues, but it was so brief. I have not given a direct answer. Alex tells him, you were told to avoid power, to avoid anger. Perhaps you are not listening as wood should listen. Go now, for this is not your resting place. Not yet. Swamp Thing, he then rejoins Constantine. He tells him what the Parliament of Trees told him. They said that I must avoid power and beware of anger, and they asked me where is evil in all the wood. Constantine is unimpressed with the information that Swamp Thing learned. He says, is that all? Bloody hell, I've read better horoscopes in the Daily Mirror. Wood elementals. They've all got dry rot, you know, all of them. Where's evil in all the wood? They should have asked me. Constantine then says that where they are heading tomorrow, down there in the Isle of Chloe in the forest of Quincavi, down there is evil in all the wood. Back in the offices of the Huma Daily Courier, the newspaper editors get rid of Howard Fleck, the photographer that took pictures of Abby and Swamp Thing together. They then discuss the value of publishing those photos in the newspaper. They wonder if they should use them. One of the editors says, nah, no paper outside of a supermarket would use these photos. I mean, it's just a guy in a suit. Look, on this picture you can see the zipper. Isn't that a zipper right there? Another man studying the picture of Swamp Thing says, I don't know, the build, the anatomy's all wrong. One of the men in the room, though, studies the photos, and he recognizes Abby as a teacher at Elysium Lawns, where his daughter sometimes attends. He's outraged that a teacher of his daughter spends her weekends half naked with guys in kinky rubber suits. Why, this is a cause for huge parental concern. I say we print the photos and be damned. And so, the photos of Abby and Swamp Thing are going to be printed in the newspaper. Swamp Thing Volume 2, Issue 48, A Murder of Crows. In the jungle, Constantine is waiting for his allies to arrive. Eventually, he is joined by Frank North and Judith. However, some other members of Constantine's crew did not show up. Benjamin Cox isn't coming. Supposedly his mother wouldn't allow him. And Sister Anne Marie, she's missing. She actually died 2 issues ago, killed by the Invunch, although Constantine does not know that yet. Well, this is going to have to be their team. So there's Constantine, Frank North, Judith, and Swamp Thing. They head through the jungle, and they arrive at a cave mouth where the Bruguera are supposedly inside of. The plan is for Swamp Thing to regrow himself in the Bruguera's central chamber, allowing him to get the jump on them, while Constantine, Judith, and Frank enter the dark cave slowly, hoping to prevent anyone from leaving from Swamp Thing's attack. So, Swamp Thing, he goes into the green while the others head into the cave. While the others are making their way through the cave, the path becomes forked, and they have to split up. Frank and Judith, they go down one path, and Constantine goes down another. As Constantine is walking down a dark path, he lights a match, and in that cave is where the Invunch finds him and attacks him. The Invunch knocks him back up against a wall, knocking him unconscious. Elsewhere, Judith and Frank, they are walking down the other path in the cave. They also seem to be flirting a bit as they talk. Eventually, Judith makes a move and convinces Frank to turn off his flashlight, and then they begin making out there in the darkness. Meanwhile, Swamp Thing, he is traveling through the green, trying to materialize in the Bruguera's chambers. But there was some sort of magical black barrier that is preventing him from getting to where he wants to go. Swamp Thing, he realizes that he was probably expected. He searches for any form of plant life near the chamber so he can grow out of that, but there is nothing. He continues searching, knowing that if he fails to get into the chamber, he will leave Constantine and the others at the mercy of whatever evil lies within. Constantine wakes up in the Bruguera's chamber. He is chained up. The Bruguera's leader taunts him, saying, "You are amongst your enemies. You are in a place of long and cruel death. The Bruguera welcomes you, Senor Constantine. We are millions of years old. Before man was the Bruguera. After the Bruguera, there's nothing." He also explains that there is no plants that grow here that would allow Constantine's ally Swamp Thing to get at them. Judith, she then arrives, and she reveals that she is in league with the Bruguera. She explains, "I had to, John. The Invunch caught up with me in London. They gave me a straight choice between joining them and what happened to Emma. Emma was killed by the Invunch. Constantine warns Judith that the Bruguera are not to be trusted, and they are all male. They will never accept her, a woman, in their group. Judith says that they will allow her to join them as a special messenger. They are going to give her the power to turn into a bird, and they are entrusting her with a sacred mission." Constantine, he asks Judith what happened to the others. Judith reveals that the Invunch killed Sister Anne Marie, and she killed Benjamin Cox and his mother when she visited them. And she also killed Frank in the cave just recently. She drops Frank's decapitated head out of a sack. Judith is unmoved by Constantine's warnings that the Bruguera will just kill her anyway. She says the Bruguera are going to bring back the original darkness and smash the throne of the divine pretender. After that, it'll be a new universe and she will have a place in it. The pit that Constantine is chained in slowly starts filling with liquid. At the same time, Judith, she strips and she follows the Bruguera's instructions. She is beginning the process of becoming a bird. She is given a foul-tasting root, which she eats, and it causes her to vomit out her innards until only her still conscious head remains. The Bruguera's master then places a black pearl into her mouth. He says, "This black pearl is distilled fruit of a year's labors. This is a token you must carry with you on your journey." The master then begins shaping Judith into her bird form with legs and a tail and eventually a beak. Judith, she happened to be wearing a yellow flower in her hair before she started stripping, and the yellow flower fell to the floor, and Swamp Thing, who this whole time was struggling to find a way into the Brujere's chambers, he finally managed to track down that flower in the green, and through it, he is finally able to sprout from that flower and arrive inside the Brujere's chambers with everyone else. The Brujere, when they see Swamp Thing, yell for the Invunch to fight him. Meanwhile, Constantine is close to drowning, the liquid in the pit almost covering his head now. He warns Swamp Thing to stop Judith from finishing the transformation and escaping. Swamp Thing does not have that much time to act though, so he just quickly chooses to save Constantine rather than try to prevent Judith's transformation and stop her from flying away with this black pearl. As Judith gets away, Constantine knows that they are in trouble then. Back in Louisiana, Abby, she arrives at work at Elysium Lawns and discovers that images of her being intimate with Swamp Thing have been published in the local newspaper. Her boss is not happy with her. Shortly after, the police come and arrest her. They are saying that she is a sex offender and she works with kids. The cops tell Abby, "Listen, I've known guys who do it with animals and laundry, but you make me sick." The cops then take her away. Swamp Thing Volume 2, Issue 49, The Summoning. Judith, now a messenger bird for the Brujere, takes off. Constantine is very disappointed that she got away. He'd planned for 2 years to stop this from happening, and he's seen 4 friends die and 1 get corrupted in the process. Yet he was still too late to stop it. Judith, as a messenger bird, made off with this black pearl in her mouth. The pearl inside was grown within the cold oyster of everyone's worst nightmares, a distilled mouthful of horror. The bird would then take it to a place beyond maps, where it would wake something beyond naming. Swamp Thing and Constantine start fighting their way out of the cave. Along the way, Swamp Thing is finally able to connect to the green as the roots of the great rainforest above them are piercing through the chamber walls. He uses it to kill the remaining Brujere behind them. Once they are safe outside, they begin planning what they need to do next. By failing to stop the messenger bird, they can now no longer stop this entity from coming back, this great darkness, but they can try and be ready for when it arrives. The two of them split up, hoping to recruit people who can help them deal with what is coming. Constantine, he goes and visits a friend of his named Baron Winters in Washington. Baron Winters is a sorcerer who, in the past, would assemble a team of chosen individuals to fight supernatural threats. His team was called Night Force, and they had a book in the 1980s that went on a 14-issue run. Baron Winters himself never participated in the missions. He would instead manipulate, sometimes unethically, others to do so for him. This was because, for reasons that are not revealed, he could never leave his Wintergate Manor, this labyrinth mansion where he lived. This mansion is located in a special juncture of time and space. It allows him to send his team to different places and times. Baron Winters also has a pet leopard named Merlin that rests by his feet. Due to the mansion's special properties, Constantine asks if he can use the Baron's house as a base of operations for the team he is building to combat the coming darkness. Baron Winters does not want to help Constantine, he argues. "Constantine, if this threat is as you say, I'll assemble my Night Force to handle it without the assistance of you amateurs." Constantine, though, eventually convinces Baron Winters to help. Once Constantine lies and says that Sargon the Sorcerer has already volunteered to help, the Baron, upon learning this, says, "Sargon? Really? Well, perhaps if he's prepared to trust you, I might conceivably allow you to use my house as well." So Constantine has one ally squared away now. Meanwhile, the bird's passage through the spirit realms attracts the attention of Dr. Fate, Dr. Occult, and Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel, we met before back in Volume 2. They are characters in The Dreaming and eventually in Sandman. Dr. Fate, though, he is Dr. Kent Nelson. He first appeared in comics in 1940. He is a powerful sorcerer and agent for the Lords of Order who fight against evil. His amulet, cloak, and helmet are creations of the ancient Nabu, who acts as his mentor and spiritual guide. Dr. Fate is a founding member of the Justice Society of America. Dr. Occult is Richard Occult, also known as the Ghost Detective. He is a private investigator who specializes in cases involving the supernatural. He first appeared in comics in 1935. So while these various characters are becoming aware of the oncoming threat, Swamp Thing, he is drifting in the green. He heads beyond it into the region of the just dead. There he encounters and recruits both Deadman and Phantom Stranger, whom he last saw back in the Swamp Thing Annual Issue 2 when they aided him in retrieving Abby's soul from hell. Together, the three of them head further into the spirit realm in search of more who can help them. Constantine, he then tracks down Sargon the Sorcerer and he manipulates him into joining their team. He name drops that Baron Winters has already offered to help them and give them use of his house. Sargon, hearing this, says, "Winter did. I should like to see the interior of that fascinating mansion once more." He guards its secrets so jealously. Sargon will help. Sargon the Sorcerer is a character that first appeared in comics way back in 1941. His power comes from the Ruby of Life. He was also a member of the All-Star Squadron during World War II. Later, Constantine visits the home of John Zatara and his daughter Zatanna Zatara. Constantine explains the situation to them. John Zatara is reluctant, but Zatanna, his daughter, who once had a romantic relationship with Constantine in the past, is more than eager for them to help. So eventually, John Zatara comes around and decides to accompany them, if only to keep Constantine's hands off of his daughter. Before they depart, Constantine and Zatanna share a kiss, somewhere where Zatanna's father would not see them. Swamp Thing, Phantom Stranger, and Deadman seek out the Spectre. When they find him, the Spectre admits that he saw the flying bird go by, but he did nothing to stop it. They ask him, why did he do nothing? This bird will bring back a horror beyond even your imaginings. It will bring back the original darkness. Yet Spectre just let it go? Spectre says he allowed the bird to pass in hopes that the great darkness will pose a worthy challenger to him, one that will truly test his worth. This perplexes the group. Deadman, talking to Swamp Thing, asks, is he crazy? He let that bird through so he'd have something big enough to scrap with? Either way, though, they are happy to have the Spectre on their side. They then travel on, and they pass the gates of hell in search of Etrigan the Demon. Etrigan, he was already aware of the danger. He admits that many of the higher demons prefer the devil they know. They don't want to risk something new taking over, so they are going to fight the great darkness and ally with Etrigan and Swamp Thing and the others. He does say, though, many of the lower demons are excited about the new evil's arrival, as it might give them an opportunity to raise their station. So some of the lower demons will be fighting against them. Etrigan, he says, this war shall burn white hot, and should we fail, then madness without end shall claim us all. Back at Baron Winter's mansion, Constantine's assembled occultists arrive and mingle with one another. Constantine has also brought his friend, Steve Dayton, aka Mento of Doom Patrol. Constantine attempts to convince Steve to put on his Mento helmet and try to make contact with the spirit realm. Eventually, after some cajoling, Steve complies. He puts on his helmet, and then his consciousness gets drawn to Judith, the bird's path in hell. He also manages to touch the minds of Swamp Thing and his friends, but again, he is drawn back away to the bird's mind. Steve is following the bird that was once Judith, but the fires of hell are so powerful that Judith can no longer hold the black pearl in her beak, and she burns to death, and the black pearl lands on the surface. The message has been delivered, and this causes the Great Darkness to be summoned. Swamp Thing Volume 2, Issue 50, The End. This is a double-length issue where a giant battle is going to go down. Alright, so we're going to have ourselves a giant battle. On the side of the bad guys is the Great Darkness, aka the Primordial Shadow. The Great Darkness is the true source and embodiment of darkness in the multiverse. In the beginning, there was only the Great Darkness. It was so vast that the newborn light was unnoticeable in comparison. However, the light expanded until eventually it became everything. When the Creator said, "Let there be light," the Great Darkness retreated and stayed inactive for unknown ages. But last issue, the Brugier occult finally succeeded in waking the Great Darkness, and they hope it will destroy God and heaven and reshape the world. Allying with the Great Darkness are some of those lower demons of hell that wouldn't mind if the status quo was changed. Now, I don't know how you battle the embodiment of darkness in the multiverse. Sounds like it's going to be hard. But on the good guy's side, there is John Constantine. He is at Baron Winter's mansion, along with various sorcerers and magic experts. They are Baron Winters and his pet leopard Merlin, Sargon the Sorcerer, Steve Dayton aka Mento, Dr. Occult, Zatanna, and her father John Zatara. In the spirit world, battling with Swamp Thing there is Deadman, Phantom Stranger, Spectre, Etrigan the Demon, and an assembled horde of demon allies that prefer the devil they know, as well as Dr. Fate. Alright, with that recap of all our major players in this battle now, let's get into it. In the dreaming, we see Cain and Abel. They watch Swamp Thing and his allies march to battle. In Baron Winter's mansion, Constantine and his crew of occultists and sorcerers begin conducting a dangerous seance, using Mento as a conduit for which they can see what is going on in the spirit world, and hopefully they can aid Swamp Thing and his allies in that spirit world. All of these sorcerers, they join hands, and they are warned to not panic and release their hands. As long as they stay connected together, they should be fine. In the spirit world, Etrigan puts on his armor, and he begins to lead the other rhyming demons in a full-on charge against the oncoming darkness. Swamp Thing and Deadman, they are marching on. They are joined by Dr. Fate and Phantom Stranger. Phantom Stranger brings with him a whole bunch of angels who will help them in their battle. Some of their demon allies aren't enthusiastic about angels joining them, but they will all stand united together, and they prepare for the Great Darkness's arrival. The Great Darkness rises from the waters of chaos beyond hell, and the sight of it is horrifying to Mento, to the point that he instantly feels all is lost. Back at the seance circle, Mento is worried. He says, "This is too much for him, man. He's nervous." His companions tell him to go on. If any of them are to leave this room alive, their only hope is to cooperate, and for Mento to tell them what he sees. So Mento, he continues working. He is watching what is going on in the spirit world and explaining it to the sorcerers in the room. Mento watches as Etrigan charges directly into the darkness's path. The sorcerers, they try to add their power to Etrigan. Etrigan, he makes contact with the Great Darkness, striking at it. The Great Darkness consumes him, and Etrigan is sucked into it. And then, when Etrigan is engulfed in the darkness speaks to him. The darkness asks Etrigan, "Little thing, you are in me, and I have a very great need. Before light, I was endless, without name, or need of name. Then light came. Witnessing its otherness, I suffered my first knowledge of self, and all contentment fled. Tell me, little thing, tell me what I am." Etrigan responds, "Your name?" Your name is evil, absence of God's light, his shadow partner locked in an endless fight. The darkness to this says, the fight is to be endless then? Little thing, you have taught me fatalism, you have taught me inevitability. They are not the things I needed. You are not the thing I needed. And with that, the darkness casts Etrigan out. Etrigan is thrown onto the ground and is unconscious. Back at the Seance Circle, the great darkness senses their efforts. It attacks them, searching for the weak link in their Seance Circle. The sorcerers there know that they must not break the circle by letting go of each other's hands, lest their powers backfire or they lose contact permanently. The darkness focuses on Sargon the sorcerer, who it believes is the weak link. Sargon begins to smolder. He is going to combust. Sargon tells the group there, I'm burning. The power, it's getting too much. I'm getting warmer. Inside me, no, I will not permit it. No. One of you must help me. I am Sargon. You cannot let this happen. John Zatera tells Sargon, you are upsetting my daughter. For the honor of our profession, be silent and die like a sorcerer. Sargon replies, You are right. Forgive me, my friends. It was the pain that spoke, not I. Sargon, he holds on, and he eventually goes up in flames and burns to death. However, Sargon, he never let his hands go from the circle. The Seance Circle is still holding his charred corpse's hands, keeping the circle intact. Constantine tells the group, We must carry on. Keep fighting to the last man if need be. Back in the spirit world, Swamp Thing, Deadman, Phantom Stranger, and Dr. Fate, they saw Etrigan get defeated. When Etrigan fell, the other demons lost what was left of their morale, and they began retreating. Swamp Thing says, who could blame them, faced with such a monstrosity? It is too big to even fully grasp its shape. It seems to be like a mountain or an island, moving relentlessly forward. Deadman and Dr. Fate fight against the demons loyal to the darkness. Fate, he kills some of the demons in anger, but he is distracted and he is soon enveloped by the great darkness, much like Etrigan was. The darkness asks Dr. Fate, In this strange place of light and order and names, I have been named evil, yet naming is not enough. I must know my nature, I must know my purpose. Tell me, little thing, what is evil? Dr. Fate responds that evil is the ignorance that drags people back as they climb toward heaven, a vile and wretched thing. The darkness responds that fate had taught him contempt. This is not the answer that was required. Dr. Fate is then expelled, same as Etrigan was, and Dr. Fate is unconscious. Deadman, he grabs Dr. Fate's body and pulls him from the darkness's path. Swamp Thing, Phantom Stranger, and Deadman wonder where the Spectre is. They then watch as the angels of heaven now charge the darkness. They worry, though, that if the angels fail, then the fate of heaven will rest in their hands. At the Seance Circle, the great darkness focuses its attack now on Zatanna. She comments how she's starting to feel really warm all of a sudden. After seeing what happened to Sargon the sorcerer, Zatanna's father will not let his daughter die. John Zatera, he utters a spell saying backwards, Darkness, take me instead. This directs the darkness's attack toward him, Zatera, instead. Horrified, Zatanna cries out for her father to take back the spell. But Zatera says, Too late, my love, too late. Constantine, if you do not deliver my daughter safely from this place, my shade shall hound you through all eternity. Is that understood? John Zatera then explodes into flames and he dies too. Zatanna is angry and grieving. Her hand is burned severely. She is still managing, though, to hold on to her dead father's crispy, burned hands. Angrily, she curses Constantine, saying, You involved us in this. My father's dead, and it's on your hands. Constantine, he says that he is sorry, but they cannot stop. They must continue their efforts. Back in the spirit world, the Spectre finally arrives. The Spectre, he grows ginormous in size, and he wrestles with the great darkness, but he too gets sucked inside of it. Once inside, the darkness asks the Spectre, "What is evil's purpose?" The Spectre answers, "Evil only exists to be avenged, so that others may see what ruin comes of opposing that great voice, and cleave more wholly to its will, fearing its retribution." The darkness casts the Spectre out, saying that the Spectre has only taught it vengeance, and it wants him gone so that it can savor it in solitude. Spectre, cast out, is lying on the ground outside, also seemingly unconscious. Swamp Thing, Phantom Stranger, and Deadman think that all hope is lost. Swamp Thing, he then decides he will try now. He walks into the darkness willingly. The darkness, sensing Swamp Thing is inside of him, asks what Swamp Thing has to offer him. Swamp Thing answers, "I have nothing. I came in resignation, whatever you are. I cannot fight you, but I cannot stand and watch." The darkness asks, will he tell him the purpose of evil? Swamp Thing responds that he cannot answer the question. He has seen evil and cruelty and the randomness with which it ravages both the guilty and the innocent alike. It cannot be understood. Swamp Thing then remembers what the Parliament of Trees told him recently about the chain of life, wherein all things die and return to the humus. Humus is the dark organic material that forms in soil when plant and animal matter decays. Swamp Thing continues, saying that the humus becomes the fertile ground in which plants grow stronger. Perhaps this mirrors the struggle between good and evil. Evil may be the humus formed of virtue's decay, and from that dark soil, virtue can grow strongest. Swamp Thing is essentially making the case that good and evil define each other and that one cannot exist without its counterpart. The darkness is not fully satisfied by Swamp Thing's answer, but the darkness allows Swamp Thing to leave freely. He tells Swamp Thing, "I see, little thing. Little thing, I sense a great and final end approaching. I would be alone. Leave freely as you came." Swamp Thing exits and returns to Phantom Stranger and Deadman. The great darkness continues toward heaven. In the seance circle, Mento is drawn close to the darkness's mind, and he becomes aware of its true nature. In the spirit world, we see our gargantuan black hand reaching closer and closer to heaven. Mento is driven to madness by the appearance of this black hand, and also of the presence of a golden hand from heaven reaching back, the hand of God. Mento, he anticipates a battle which will see everything destroyed once these hands touch. However, when the golden hand of God and the black hand of the great darkness touch, the two of them embrace and merge, and the darkness becomes part of God's own being, and the world will never be the same again. Good and evil will still exist, but they will forever be inseparable, like yin and yang. The image of this drives Mento completely insane. He laughs maniacally. He says, "I can see it all. No, it doesn't make sense. I don't understand. It's shell I saw. I know what it is. I know it's just a fingernail. I saw it." So Mento, he's driven completely insane by his revelation that this black mass that they called the Great Darkness, that they were battling this whole time, that was only just part of a finger and fingernail belonging to the gigantic black hand. In the spirit world, the black hand and the golden hand from heaven, they then disappear into one another. Back in the seance circle, Dr. Occult senses that the power seems to have discharged itself, and that they can release each other's hands now. Constantine says, "I don't believe it. We did it. We're still here." Baron Winter replies, "Not all of us, Constantine. Some of us are dead. Some of us are gone." There were 3 casualties in their battle. Sargon the Sorcerer and John Zatera are dead, and Mento is now insane. Constantine senses that whatever they experienced was not a victory, but rather a no-score draw between good and evil. In the spirit world, with the great darkness gone, everything seems calm again. Swamp Thing, Deadman, and Phantom Stranger discuss. Phantom Stranger explains that while light and shade are still surrounding them, the conflict between them has been altered. There is a sharpness, a distinctiveness in the air that was recently more foggy. The stranger marvels at how much light and dark, good and evil, seem to depend on one another. Swamp Thing can't help but wonder how the events of this day will have changed the world as they know it. In the dreaming, Cain and Abel, watching the end of the battle, prepare to head back inside to their homes, now that the show is over. Abel is a little worried. He comments, "They spoke as if good and evil didn't mean the same thing anymore." Cain replies, "So, who cares? They're still there, aren't they?" Abel continues, but don't you see? Nearly all our stories revolve around good struggling against evil, darkness against light. What will become of the stories without the ancient conflict to fall back on? What will they be about?" Cain replies, "Brother, please, don't worry yourself about it. I'm sure we'll think of something." Cain then pushes his brother off of a cliff, and then he heads back into his house. And that is the end of Volume 4. Alright, so that was Swamp Thing Volume 4. Let me go through my thoughts on this one. I have a lot of things I want to talk about here. Alright, the Chester Williams, the hippie that collected the tuber and was slicing it up and giving it to people, I thought that was a fantastic one-shot issue. I can't believe there was a whole issue devoted to that, but it was amazing. I loved seeing everyone's different experiences on the tuber, and then Chester debating, should he eat it? But he doesn't want to confront if it will tell him if he is a good or bad person or not. Great stuff. I liked when Swamp Thing visited Abby in her apartment. I thought that was clever, but also really funny. And Abby was putting newspaper down because she didn't want her to get her apartment ruined, so really funny stuff there. The Swamp Thing Bogeyman issue was decent. Not amazing, but decent. The Haunted House issue with the ghosts that were killed by the rifle, I thought was really compelling. I liked learning about the real house that story was based on. So I thought that was a solid one-shot issue. The Crisis on Infinite Earths tie-in issue, I did not much care for, because Crisis on Infinite Earths is convoluted, and I don't want to have to think about it, and I'd rather just pretend it, is the thing that happened, but I don't have to think about ever, and I don't really want something tying into it and spending that much time on it, and thankfully, he doesn't really spend that much time on it. It's kind of just that one issue, and then Constantine is like, yeah, that's happening, but we have to deal with this Bruguera group instead. And thankfully, we jump onto that. We had Swamp Thing meeting the Parliament of Trees, which is a fascinating way to expand Swamp Thing's mythology, and lots of interesting things to explore there in the future. So I thought that was great stuff. We had the photographer snapping pictures of Swamp Thing and Abby making out in the swamp, which was the funniest thing to me. This photographer is so skeevy. I love how he was rationalizing stuff to the newspaper people. So he's taking pictures of Abby. She's getting topless, and he's continuing to take the pictures, and he's like, I was going to ask her for permission, but I didn't want to ruin the spontaneity of the moment. So funny. And then when Swamp Things and Abby are making out, he's like so grossed out by it, and I love some of the stuff he says about how disgusted he was by everything. Ah, man. Really funny. And I also think it was funny how Abby got arrested from that. And it actually leads to a really compelling storyline in next volume. So really great stuff there. All right. We had the battle with the Bruguera, which I thought was interesting. And then that led to this battle with the Great Darkness. Now, the battle with the Great Darkness, I'm a little bit mixed on. Because the concept of the Great Darkness as a villain is kind of weird. How do you battle just the epitome of darkness itself? And then they did all this battling, and then in the end, it just kind of shaked hands with God's hand, and then that was it. So it was kind of anticlimactic in a way. And did they really even do anything? Maybe not. However, it was exciting to get all of those heroes together, and we had 2 character deaths in one issue. Mind you, they're characters that maybe aren't super important, but still, character deaths. So this Sargon the sorcerer guy, he was a character that's been around for a long time. I'm not really familiar with him, but he's been around for a long time, and they killed him off. So that was interesting. And then, of course, Satana's dad, John Zatara, this is the issue where he dies. So, yeah, really compelling stuff. This was a really fun volume. I'm going to give this one an 8.5 out of 10. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back in the future with Volume 5.